Before even starting to describe the movement, let's remember that every anatomical description is made using the standard anatomical position. What is the anatomical position? Remember, you're standing up with your arms on the sides, palms are facing forward, your eyes are looking at me, and your feet are placed together on the ground, toes pointing forward. Very important, especially now that we're going to describe the movements. The same anatomical position, if you're laying down, you're facing down, keeping the arms as described, that's the prone position. Now, if you're going to lay up, like staring at the stars at night, again, keeping the anatomical position, that's the supine position. Now, that was my parenthesis. Let's start describing the movements that are happening at these synovial joints. And we have just three types of movements. We can glide two bony surfaces, like sliding one on top of the other one. Since this is such a subtle movement, usually occurs at the carpal bones, tarsal bones, we cannot see it. We're not going to describe it in this video. Now, the other two types of movements, we're going to describe them. One is the angular movement, meaning that what we're going to do there is to change an angle between the two body parts. So we are going to either reduce or increase the angle. And rotation happens like this. Okay, this is the angular movement when you are decreasing or increasing the angle. Here you decrease it, you're increasing the standard anatomical position, and you can pass this, and this is increasing the angle. Now, if you turn, I hope you're seeing that I am turning the pen on top of the surface. This is rotation in the longitudinal axis of the body. And if I do this, this is gliding. So gliding, rotation, and angular movement. So it can be, look at this angular movement, can be following the sagittal plane, and we're going to describe in here flexion and extension. It can follow the coronal or frontal plane, and we're going to describe abduction and adduction. Using the transverse plane is the one used to describe rotation. Got it? Let's start describing flexion. Behind the image, it says angular movement, I believe, flexion, extension. That's my title, the title of my slide. Sorry. Okay, flexion. When we describe this movement, they usually come in pair. And it's a pair of opposite movements. One is flexion, the other one is extension. One is, for example, this is flexion of the forearm, and the other one reverses the movement and bring it back to anatomical position. When we are in anatomical position, almost all our articulations are in extension, okay? So bring them back to anatomical position is extending. If we pass this frontal plane, the plane of the anatomical position, that's hyperextension. Let's describe this. So we said flexion, extension is the first pair of movements that we're going to describe, and we have to be specific as where this movement is happening. I think I have told you this before. If you just, let's say if I do this in a video, or let's do this in a video, and I ask you, what is the name of the movement? If you say just flexion, which is correct, this is flexion, I will mark it wrong. You need to be specific as what are you flexing? So this is the flexion of the forearm at the elbow, because that's where the movement is happening. See? Touch it. So with that being said, let's describe flexion and extension. Inflection as an angular movement is when you reduce the angle between the two body parts. And when you open up the angle, you increase the angle, that's extension. So this lady who's ready for a workout session, and I meant the other image before, but on the trunk, see that when she bends over, she's reducing the angle between her trunk and her legs. That's flexion of her trunk. When she goes back to the anatomical position, that's extension of the trunk. But if she, instead of stopping right here in anatomical position, she bends backwards, that is hyperextension. So there is no hyperflexion, you cannot curl more than that, but there is hyperextension when you pass the anatomical position plane. That's the trunk. Look, this red dot in here. That is telling you that that's the joint that, or where the movement is going to be happening. So at the shoulder, we can flex the arm. And look, this is, in here I have my shoulder. Okay, shoulder, I am decreasing the angle between the arm and my trunk. So this is flexion. Okay, this is flexion. Bring it back to anatomical position. This is extension of the arm at the shoulder. And this is hyperextension of the arm at the shoulder. So what is moving? Regardless that you have the elbow bent, flexed, or extended, what we are describing now is the movement around the shoulder. So flexion, extension, and hyperextension of the arm, that's what you're moving, of the arm at the shoulder, at the glenohumeral joint, if you want to be more fancy like I like. Let's describe flexion extension at the elbow. I don't know if I have the image for that. Apparently not. At the elbow. So I'm going to put that red dot at my elbow and anatomical position, right? So flexion is the anterior movement. So this is flexion of the forearm at the elbow, extension of the forearm at the elbow. Now I am here in anatomical position. Thanks to the olecranon fitting into the olecranon fossa of the elbow, I cannot hyperextend. See, I cannot pass the plane of the anatomical position. So at the elbow is just flexion and extension of the forearm at the elbow. What else can we flex? Let me see. I thought I had it. At the hip. Well, we already saw that in here. And here is at the hip, so you're flexing the trunk at the hip. Another way to describe this movement at the hip is, instead of bringing down your trunk, which is flexion, you can you can lift the thigh closer to your trunk. So this is flexion of the thigh at the knee. At the hip. Okay, and you can be like that, and still this is flexion of the thigh at the hip. Going back from this position to anatomical position, this is extension of the thigh at the hip. Passing posteriorly the plane, the anatomical plane, anatomical position plane, this is hyperextension. So flexion, extension, hyperextension of your thigh at the hip. Flexion, extension at the knee. Look. I have my knee, in anatomical position is in extension, and this is flexion of the leg, at the knee. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension. One more, your head. You can flex your neck, okay, or your head to bring it closer to your chest. So this is flexion of your head or of your neck, of your cervical column. This, can you see me? Yeah. Bring it back to anatomical position. That is extension. And if you move it posteriorly past the anatomical plane, that's hyperextension. So again, flexion, extension, hyperextension of your neck. Oh, that feels good. When describing movement in your assignments, discussions, tests, etc., please, most of the students tend to say, okay, this is flexion extension. And you cannot see which one is flexion, which one is extension. You need to take the time to describe each separately. Now, let's describe now abduction and adduction. And since these two, as you can see, the only difference in here is one letter, the B and the D, we tend to use abduction and adduction. So abduction, I'm going to abduct you. So I'm going to take you away from the body. That's abduction. Adduction is when you bring the structure back to closer to the body. So abduction is a lateral movement. Adduction is a medial movement. So with the arm, this is both abduction and this is adduction. You can, when you open the legs, that's abduction. When you close them, that's adduction. Your fingers, for example, this is abduction and this is adduction. We'll describe later because there's some tricks in here. Circumduction. I love these terms. Circumduction is just a combination or a sequence of flexion, abduction, adduction, and extension. Again, it's like you're going to draw a circle in the screen, like that. I'm drawing a circle. So what I'm doing is flexion of the arm, right? So flexion, abduction, adduction, extension. That's the combination or the sequence that describes circumduction. We can do circumduction with your shoulder joint and at the hip joint, at the fingers too. Of course, and not at your head. Exorcism. Okay. Rotation. So remember, it's like grabbing a pen and then you're going to do this. You're going to rotate it, right, along your longitudinal axis, which is the vertical line here in the midline. So rotation, you can rotate your head, your cervical column, like saying no. Remember the articulation that is doing this? Yes, the articulation between the atlas and the dance of the axis. What else? We can rotate our trunk, right? So this is rotation. Oh, it feels good. Okay. Don't get confused with lateral flexion that Hashim mentioned before. Lateral flexion of your neck is this. When you try to get the ear to your shoulder, can you hear what the shoulder is saying? Let me hear this one. See, this is lateral flexion. This is lateral flexion at the trunk. Totally different than this. Rotation, lateral flexion. On the trunk, rotation and lateral flexion. Okay? What else can we rotate? We can rotate, and because these two are in the actual skeleton. On the appendicular skeleton, we can rotate the shoulder and the hip. And this is best seen when you have the forearm in flexion. So this is medial rotation towards the midline, and this is lateral rotation away from the midline. Same thing with your thigh. So this will be medial rotation and lateral rotation. What else? What else? Okay, now we have some special movements that they are not gliding movements, they are not angular, we're not changing an angle, and they're not rotation. So we're just going to mention in different categories. First, we have elevation and depression. So elevation is, for example, when you shrug your shoulders. I don't care. That's elevation of your shoulders, the scapula, the one moving in there. Depression, don't be depressed. You're going to depress the scapula. You put it down. It happens also in the mandible. This is elevation of the mandible, is this. I have in my mouth shut. Now, when I depress the mandible, I cry. No, when I depress the mandible, I open my mouth. Depression, elevation, depression, elevation. Okay. What else? And in there, now that I'm here, we also have at the temporomandibular joint, because that's where these movements are happening. Do you see the red dot in here? That's elevation. Well, let's start with depression, elevation, but we also have, and feel it. Feel the right in here. Place your index right in front of your ear in here, and open, close, and do lateral excursion, which is a lateral movement of your mandible. Can you feel the joint moving in there? That's the temporomandibular joint, TMJ. Another special movement, and this is an exclusive movement of the forearm. And then we have pronation and supination. If we are in an anatomical position, well, let me rephrase this. When you put your palms facing up, like you're holding a warm bowl of soup, and I call this movement the supination, S-O-U-P instead of S-U-P, it's correctly spelled. But just a silly way to remember that in the supination, you can hold a bowl of soup. In the pronation, you can tip your waiter. Tip, okay? So this is supination and this is pronation. Another movement is the opposition, which I think and truly believe is not the only thing that differentiates humans from gorillas. So on the opposition, the thumb, your pollex, can touch the other fingers like this. So this is opposition, like this, at the level of your metacarpophalangeal joint, or touching just your distal phalanges. That's opposition. And reposition is just put it back in anatomical position. On your foot, what do we have in your foot? We have two movements that we can describe on the feet. We have, that is dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. Let's say that this is your foot, this is the heel of your foot. In dorsiflexion, you're putting your toes up toward your leg, like you're walking on your heels. That's dorsiflexion. Plantar flexion, now you're walking on your toes, like a ballerina. Like when we wear high heels, we are in plantar flexion. What else? Now, inversion and eversion. Again, movements are exclusive for the feet. They happen only on the feet. So again, let's imagine these are my feet, because I'm not going to show you my feet. So these are the feet, and when you move the sole of your feet medially, both of them, Like this? Okay, let me show you. Wait. Okay, this, moving both soles of your feet immediately, this is inversion. When you move them laterally, like that, that's eversion. So, inversion, both soles are looking at each other. Hi. Eversion, they're mad at each other. That's inversion and eversion. The next video lecture, I'm going to describe now the synovial joint types. But I want to tell you this one more time. I cannot stress how important it is for you to study the movements and to master, and you're comfortable using the movements, and that you have to describe the movement, at what joint is happening, and at what joint is happening. Why these are going to facilitate so much the study of the muscle next module. So love it.